Great. Glad you guys can hear me. Shout out to Car to start off. Thank you guys so much for letting me do this presentation. I put some good time into it, and I'm really excited to share this with you guys because I think there is a big hole that a lot of you can fill here in the startup space by improving your marketing and improving the media. It's just little tweaks that will make a gigantic difference and will help the growth of a lot of your startups accelerate. And I think that's what everybody here really wants to do is accelerate the growth and really move forward with your companies and make sure that everybody that or make sure that your passion, your company, and everything that you're building is seen by everybody and you're able to put yourself in the best position for success. Now let's start it off. I like to ask this kind of open-ended question to start off is what do you think like successful marketing looks like? Now, I'm going to give you an example here in a second, but I want you to think of different companies that you've seen, maybe some different ones, and I want you to think outside of the Bitcoin space. I don't want you to necessarily think about what does a successful company look like in the Bitcoin space, just outside, because that's where I'm going to start. Apple. Apple is probably one of the most successful companies. And what is their marketing really? It's an iPhone, right? I mean, I've got an iPhone here. I'm speaking to you guys on a MacBook. I got my AirPods in. They've been able to create this, I guess, like almost like not quite circular economy, but just keep you drawn into everything that Apple does. Now we had Steve Jobs, and the next CEO who's presenting here is Tim Cook. He's a little bit small here on the screen, but you can see that Steve Cook essentially Tim Cook, excuse me, followed basically directly after Steve Jobs in his footsteps. But when you think of Apple, what do you think of? You think of white, you think of chic, you think of clean. The logo is very simple, nothing too complex, just very chic, very clean. And if you ask many people in the United States, you would say the iPhone is probably the greatest invention that's ever been, right? It had that first mover advantage. There's majority of people in the United States have an iPhone, right? Well, that's where I think there's the misconception and where oh, whoops, excuse me, I'm getting ahead of myself. But a big thing that Apple does here is that they have their Apple event every single year. It's a huge giant event where they don't necessarily need to spend a lot on marketing for other avenues. They have their full on event. What do they do every single Apple event? Everybody tunes in, hey, what's going to happen? For the past 4 or 5 years, all they've done is improve the camera on the iPhone. But thousands, millions of people tune in every single year. Millions of people wait in line to go get that new iPhone, the new breaking iPhone. Why do you do that? Well, it's a lot and part of their marketing. You want to have that new clean feature. You want to have 3 cameras on the back of your phone instead of 2. You want to have, 2 cameras on the back of your phone instead of 1. So Apple's marketing has been absolutely outstanding, but they haven't really changed much since the invention of the iPhone, 15, 20 years ago. They've simply just marketed it really well and, created a moat around what the perception is that everybody owns an iPhone. Well, in reality, if you look at the iPhone sales relative and the smartphone sales relative to everybody around the globe, Apple is second to Samsung. But if you were to ask me, what does a Samsung smartphone look like? I would maybe be able to tell you 1 or 2, but I wouldn't know the name of that Samsung phone. And that's strictly because I know what an iPhone looks like, right? They always have that unique branding. Um, so that is a big example that I'd like to put out of like what successful marketing looks like from a company. Apple, I believe, is one of the best marketed companies in the globe. And, you could even tell from this market share, this is a little easier to see that Samsung has about 19%. And Apple has about 16. But if you were to ask on the surface level, I think a lot of people would think that iPhones are the most successful smartphone company strictly because of their marketing and their perception. So Why is marketing important? I think it is one of the most, if not the most important thing for your business, because the best product does not always win, right? Because the best products are strictly the ones that are sold the best and the marketed the best. And if you have a product that is good as well, which I know many of you in here, you guys believe in what you're building, right? So you wouldn't be going through this journey of a startup if you didn't truly believe in what you were building. But a big component of that is you need to be able to market and sell that product or that service or whatever it is, because the best product doesn't always win, right? The iPhone was a first mover, but if you think back to other first movers, like MySpace, for example, in social media, who uses MySpace anymore? Maybe I'm dating myself and you guys are all a little younger than me, but I remember getting a MySpace account was absolutely huge. Well, then came Facebook, and then that was marketed a little better and it had the network effects. And then it was Instagram, and now it's TikTok and whatever. But the best product does not always win. It's the ones that are able to be marketed and sold the best, and also pivoted a little bit. And we'll get into that a little bit. But now we're going to get into the Bitcoin space. Now I want you to sit here and think a little bit about who you think the best marketers in Bitcoin are. Now, I'm not talking to too many people here like myself. So I'm going to do a little bit of a dramatic pause, or maybe just talk through it here to give you guys a moment to think about who you think the best marketers in Bitcoin are. And I'll tell you right off the bat, the best, I think, without question, is Jack Mallers, right? He's the Strike CEO. You see him everywhere. You see the clips of what Jack is doing. Anytime Jack is on TV, it's must-watch clips. You really want to see what they're doing. But what is Strike's, marketing tactics? Have you seen Strike marketing anywhere lately? Do you see Strike shelling out thousands of dollars every single month to different companies in order to market? If you look at their branding, it's very simple, very chic, just Strike, black with white text, right? But outside of Jack really going on podcasts and going on stage at these giant conferences, Strike is not paying thousands of dollars to market on podcasts, thousands of dollars to market all over on everywhere. Maybe Strike sponsored one of the first Bitcoin conferences I recall maybe a few years ago. But since that date, Strike has not done that. Why? That's a big part into Jack Mallers. Anytime that people hear Jack Mallers, they associate him with Strike, and people tune in and know that, hey, Jack is Strike, right? And he's a big representation of that brand. And I'll get into why that is important later. But just sit here and think, okay, Jack is building Strike. He's raised billions and millions of dollars. Like, I don't think I'm necessarily Jack Mallers. Well, you don't need to be Jack Mallers in order to market your company the best. All you need to do is you need to be you. And that is what the main message of all of this is going to be, is that you need to be you. You need to be unequivocally yourself. You need to be everything that you think that you are, right? You need to not be afraid of putting yourself out there and marketing yourselves, because I'll get into a few examples here down the road, but people are connecting with people more so than brands, and that is going to be a growing trend. And so no matter who you are, you could be the craziest person in the world, you could be soft spoken, but you need to be yourself and not be afraid to be yourself, because a lot of people are simply just waiting for a perfect time to market, waiting for the perfect scenario to come in. So no matter how crazy you are, you could be this guy here. I don't know if you guys seen him, but he's a dart thrower. His name is Stephen Bunting. I would have had no idea who he is, but he comes on the stage like this.
On the right side, the bullet, Stephen Bunting!
So I want to play one more little section of this too, because I think it's just absolutely hilarious. Where this guy, he's just able to market himself very much so, right? So he's up here. So no matter who you are, right, you need to be yourself. And I have a video here of a podcast. It's a great podcast here, from the Diary of a CEO. And this guy, what he does is he studies trends. He studies what is coming forward for new CEOs and everything else. So he describes here, and I'll let him kind of go into why, but he describes the growing trend that people want to connect with people and not brands. And that is going to be the new wave here. How do you do that? And why is that a growing trend? I'll let him explain.
And I ended up writing the book called Key Person of Influence in 2009, and it came out in 2010. And what I felt very confident about was this idea that the future was going to see a shift from business and institutional brands to personal brands, that we would see the decline of big faceless companies and the rise of individuals whose personal brands were bigger than the institutions. And it was a pretty radical idea at the time, but I felt pretty confident about it. And the more I wrote about it, the more I felt this was where the world was heading. If we look today, we can see Professor Brian Cox has more followers than CERN. We can see Richard Branson has orders of magnitude more followers than Virgin. We can see Elon's got more followers than NASA. We can see, Trump is way more powerful than the Republican Party.
So I think that is very important to.
And I ended up.
Excuse me. I think that is very important to look at what the trends are going on around the globe, right? Not just in the Bitcoin space specifically, but around the globe, right? I mean, you saw all that, right? Elon has more followers than NASA. Would you know more about SpaceX than NASA? Probably. And why do you think that reason is? It's because of somebody like Elon who's able to market himself, and people really want to relate to the person behind the brand. So I'm showing you all of this because I want you guys to not be afraid to put yourself out there, to follow the trends, because the growing aspect of marketing just in general is people want to get to know the brands. So if you're building a company, the best thing that you can do, in my opinion, is start to put yourself out there and really follow the trends. Now, I'm going to dive in on how you could do that. Part of it is by, growing your personal brand as well as the brand marketing brand. And, that can come in many different shapes and forms. But another snippet from this podcast that I want to show you guys is, kind of what the growing trend is going to be of CEOs. So you saw that, the initial trend is that people are really starting to gravitate towards people opposed to brands. Now, how are we going to potentially start to see CEOs act here going forward? What is going to be the new wave of marketing? Well, I'll let this guy tell you a little bit about what he's seeing and that aspect. But a little spoiler is a big part of it is long form content and podcasting, and I'll let him explain why.
Action cycle, and what we've seen with Trump and going on Rogan and Kamala going on Alex Cooper in the media lens.
That's what cost the election. So that's a big trend. US presidential elections have always predicted major trends. So Franklin Roosevelt in the 30s, he did the national radio campaign. JFK in the 60s did the televised campaign. Obama in 2008 did the social media campaign. Each of those campaigns changed the game. Trump in 2016 did a hyper-personalized digital data-driven campaign, famously with Cambridge Analytica, and that actually gave birth to data analytics and hyper-personalization. And then something big happened in 2024. And what happened is that Trump broke the mold on campaigning, and he started going on all these major podcasts. And if we actually crunch the numbers, Trump did something like 40 hours worth of watch time and it got 124 million views. And Kamala did, I think it was 7 hours.
Just in the long form.
Yeah, just on the long form. She did 7 hours total, and it only got a few million views. And one of her podcasts only lasts 7 minutes. Now, what she did is she approached it like a McKinsey consultant, which is she turned up and she said, here's the script, here's the questions. Ask me these questions and then I'm out of here. And it was very much the kind of professional corporate approach. Trump rocks up onto comedians' podcasts and says, yeah, ask me anything. And then he just goes on a big rant and it goes for 3 hours. Now,
Action cycle and what we've seen with Trump.
Now, I think that's a big aspect here, right? Is you need to be not afraid to be you in these podcasts, right? You need to be willing to just go on to a bunch of different mediums, go through long form, because people really want to connect with you, the CEO, the founder, the face behind the brand, right? You need to be, instead of framing it like that and thinking that you're going to be the face behind the brand, you need to put your face in front of the brand, right? Oh, that is Brandon from Green Candle. Oh, this is Carr from PlebLab. That's how people are going to know you and associate you. So you need to not be afraid in order to get into these long form podcasts and, you know, strictly just be yourself in front of a lot of them, right? So what does being yourself really mean? Well, it means like, hey, look at me, for example. Absolute stud athlete here, former Division I track star and everything like that. But here's a video of me. So there's a video of me falling and absolutely failing here. Absolutely failing in track, right? So even though I was, I could frame it as, I was this stud athlete. I'm not afraid to show you guys, hey, look, I messed up in this one in this one video that's all over the internet, and I'm not going to show you guys where that is necessarily, but you need to be okay and comfortable with yourself in order for people to connect with you, right? People, I think that a lot of founders, from what I found, wait for the perfect time in order to start marketing. Wait for the perfect time to get on a podcast. They're very self-conscious about what they're saying. They get nervous behind the camera and really say, hey, they're afraid of slipping up and saying the right thing or the wrong thing. When in reality, if you make a mistake, people probably like that a little bit better than if you just try to put out a perfectionist type of persona, so to speak. So, there's really just like two forms of marketing here, right? There's the brand versus the personal marketing, right? Wrong, right? They're exactly the same thing. Like I've been trying to kind of get across here through this presentation is people really want to associate you with the brand, right? And so they want to hear the voice. They don't want to hear some sort of monotone. They want to feel some emotion. They want to connect with Carr at PlebLab. And that's why they're going to keep coming back to PlebLab, because they have a connection with Carr. Carr's helped them, throughout all of this time. And Carr's never swayed away. They know who Carr is. And they say, hey, I really appreciate what Carr has done. Even if like on a personal level, like, I've known Carr for maybe 3 or 4 years. Maybe Carr doesn't agree with everything that I do, but, Carr has been very supportive of all of the things that I have done. And same thing with PlebLab, right? And that's because like Carr has seen the growth, he's seen the effort, and he's been there through the journey, right? So same kind of thing with like PlebLab or some of these other brands, is that people really want to connect with you, the founder. And so the earlier that you get out there, the better, because if you wait for the perfect moment in order to do that, right? People are not going to really know who you are. Maybe they're not going to support you from the beginning. The more people that know you and connect with you for the beginning, even if there's going to be other competitors that come up, they're going to support you because they've known you, they've seen the journey, and they really want to support you and the brand and the mission that you're bringing up. So the growing trend here is that Every single company has some sort of long form YouTube page or some sort of social media. And I don't think that there's ever a time that is too early to necessarily start, right? So, like I said, I think that the sooner the better. If you have an idea, you should start trying to market it, start trying to put feelers out there, create some sort of audience or brand. Don't be afraid saying, oh, I'm not going to launch this. Like, what is the fear of potentially like being in front of people, right? It's like, oh, I could be embarrassed if I failed or whatever. At the end of the day, so what, right? I mean, I just showed you guys a video of me falling on a track meet. But if I didn't show you that video and I told you, hey, I ran Division I track for 4 years, you guys would have thought, oh, everything was great. You have no idea how good of an athlete I was or anything along those lines. But in that race, I got last out of 5 people and I fell over a hurdle. So it wasn't exactly my best showing, but that's all to being said. Like, you don't have to wait for the perfect time in order to show something, because it's all a part of the journey of going the ups and the downs, right? So we have companies in all different stages here, right? We've got Unchained, who's right down the road from you guys at the Bitcoin Commons. Maybe some of you guys are watching this from the Bitcoin Commons. We've got Swan, a behemoth who has 172,000 subscribers. We've got a friend of the program here, Jim at Cascader, with just getting started, just 7 videos, but he's putting out content. And then PlebLab here, where you guys are watching this from. I'm sure this video might end up there as well. Also, starting their YouTube channel. So it's very important, I think, to kind of get started and not be afraid to put yourself out there and start to market right away, because people really want to connect with you, and then thus will start associating yourself with the brand. So now, how do you get started, right? Like, what is the most important thing when you are getting started? It's your messaging and your framing. Now, it might sound a little bit crazy, like, what is the messaging? What is the framing? Well, take this video for example, right? This is one of my first big interviews I got with Jeff Booth nearly a year ago, right? So this is how I framed it. I just said, hey, I did a live stream on this. I'm going to ask Jeff about the SEC crackdown, the AI, and Bitcoin. And that's what I'm going to put on here. Outside of that, I'm not really sure, what's going to happen. It was a live stream video. It got 915 views, which was pretty good for my channel at that time. But I made some changes. I made changes to the title, the thumbnail, and the intro clip, which I will show you guys in a minute. Made zero change to the overall content outside of putting a 1-minute edited clip at the beginning, which was one of the first edited clips that I got from this editor. And it literally made a 55 times difference in the views, right? So here, I'll show you this edited.
All of the models that we've used in previous models to be able to understand how the world works, they're all flawed because money was always flawed. Throughout history, if you could control the money, you could control society. All of these models, when you ask a question, COVID or inflation or deflation or all of these things, those are all constructs of the existing system. AI, since the 50s, has had the exact same line if you're measuring logarithmically, if you're measuring exponentially. The likelihood of it changing in the
So there's just like
all
a
of the models that we've
30-second clip in that. So a 10% difference in the changes of that I've made, a minute clip in the beginning, making sure I had a good framing of the content of title and video, the title and the thumbnail, as well as that intro clip, made a 55 times view difference in that. So no change in the content, didn't change the interview. I even republished the interview 4 months later, and it got 55 times more views, right? So little changes, the way you frame things, the way you're framing your marketing, the way you're presenting everything can make a drastic change in the amount of eyeballs that you're being able to get to your company, that you're being able to get to your videos, and the more that people are going to be able to connect to you, right? So I think a big thing is that, the title, the thumbnail, and the hook on YouTube videos, on Twitter threads, on whatever type of content messaging that you're putting out there is extremely important. And it's something that, you should spend the most time on, because that is the messaging or the framing or the idea of the content, right? So the idea of what you are presenting, the idea, if you are not clear on what your product is or what need that you're filling, you're not going to be able to present and send that or even sell that to whoever you are presenting it to. So if you're able to give a concise 1 minute, 30-second idea of, hey, this is what this whole long podcast is going to be about. This is why you should care about this. If you're looking for AirPods, for example, right? A good way to market or frame that would be, are you tired of these or are you tired of the headphones where you're running into all of the wired connections, right? If you're turning your head too much, do you lose the sound? Are you not able to travel around and use your hands freely because you have this wire there? Okay, well, here's the solution. It's headphones without needing that wire. So framing that, instead of saying like, hey, these are some cool headphones with no wires, it's like, why do you really care about that, right? So it's kind of showing a problem, highlighting an idea, and framing the sales pitch or the marketing tactic around that idea. So little changes can make a dramatic difference in order to get your videos, get your ideas, get your brand out there. So I think a big issue that a lot of Bitcoiners run into is they say, hey, this is clickbait, right? This is getting people onto this content. I don't really like that idea because it's all clickbait. When in reality, you don't need to do the full on like dramatic hands on the face, big giant things, big giant changes, but you need to be able to highlight your voice and highlight things where it makes them a little bit bigger. And just little tiny changes can help get your messaging out there more, right? Why do people know about the clickbaiting? Well, it's because that content was able to go viral because it enticed people to click on that title. It enticed people to actually watch that content. When in reality, if you're not clickbaiting or in reality, if you are clickbaiting or kind of going about it that way, you're eventually going to lose, your dedicated fans, dedicated followers, because if they just click on the video, realize the video is trash or whatever, they're not going to actually watch it, right? But if it's, and if it's enticing, it spikes some sort of curiosity, people will then watch the content and continue to follow the branding and everything else, right? So I don't know if Austin is in there, but here's a great example, right? So Austin's made a few different changes on his thumbnails, and he's talked to me a little bit about what some of those changes that he can make, but little different things of the way how he's presenting these videos, right? So he's got great content, some of the best out there. PlebDevs is awesome. You guys should check out his channel. But if you look, he was getting 28 views, 110. He had one kind of pop with 363, 103. Well, all he did was make his messaging a little bit bigger, make his messaging on his titles a little bit clearer. And you've seen the views now spike up to, for what is this, 30, 100 times or 10 times bigger, at least comparatively to his last video. And all it was just little changes. It's not huge clickbait or anything else. It's just little changes of how he's framing the videos, the intros, the titles, and the thumbnails, which are enticing people to then tune into his content and get to know this. And I think this is a huge issue in the Bitcoin space, because a lot of Bitcoiners are worried about the whole clickbait aspect. But if you go to YouTube right now and you search Bitcoin, all you're going to find is, Altcoin Daily, My Financial Friend, like all these guys who are talking about Ethereum and all these other things. So if you want to get your messaging out there, you need to look at what's working and why, and question why people are looking at, maybe if they're searching Bitcoin, some other crypto thing or whatever it is, something similar to you. Success leaves clues. And I'll get into that a little bit later, but you should be checking out about what other people are doing, why these titles, why these thumbnails are working, and why maybe what you're putting out there isn't reaching as many people as maybe you'd had hoped. So that brings me to media and podcast. You should say, how should I maximize my media, my podcast / media appearances? The biggest thing is people want to know about you, right? So a big thing is not to be like, hey, I'm, Brandon from Green Candle at the very beginning. If you can avoid that, right? Maybe it is part of the job of the host in order to wait until a little bit later, maybe talk about, like, get to know you, why are you into Bitcoin? What are some things that are hot? Bitcoin crossed 100,000. Where do you think it's going from here? All these different kind of enticing topics that potentially could be interest to the average person necessarily, but do not shill your product or service or try to turn it back into, whatever you're doing right out at the gate, because when people feel like they're being sold something, and the only reason is to, necessarily like listen to this podcast so that you can sell your product or service, they essentially just tune out. And when they tune out, that's when your messaging doesn't go as far as it necessarily needs to. So people, like I said, really want to connect with you as the person. They really want to see you, and get to know who you are down the line. And so that, I think, is, the biggest stress here is, don't chill out the gate. What is your orange pill story? Not a lot of people want to, no, like, I mean, I'm sure some people are curious about that. They want to get to know your orange pill story, but, what they really want to come and listen to is, like, your opinions on everything. They don't want to always make it all about, I got into Bitcoin in 2012 and, it was this long story about my mom or whatever. People like to hear your opinions on topics. And, maybe you'll get into the orange pill story and they'll get curious about that. But what draws people in initially will be some of the hot button topics. For example, right, here's a podcast that I was recently on, and we talked about a little bit about Green Candle towards the end. It's a 30-minute podcast. It's the most views I've ever had. What is the topic of this podcast? The framing of this video. It's, hey, Brandon says you can retire on 0.1 Bitcoin and why there's a case for 1.7 million in Bitcoin this year. Maybe you don't want to talk about price. You want to talk about some other things. And maybe you think I'm some sort of moon boy because of that. But people clicked on this topic because they're like, all right, who is this guy? Why is he talking about 1.7 million here? Or, how could I potentially retire on simply just 0.1 Bitcoin? That sounds enticing. That's the idea behind this video. But if you actually watch that interview, we talked about, 5 or 6 different topics. We didn't just strictly talk about that, but it's all about the framing. And from that video, more people know about Green Candle because of the way that this was, framed and put out there. Right. Also, you don't have a ton of control of, what the podcaster or whatever is going to frame that. But just be aware that, a lot of the good ones out there are going to hit a hot button topic, and you should have some sort of opinion about that. You can watch other interviews about what some of these guys have been doing. Robin Sayer puts out a podcast literally every single day. So you can go and see, hey, I might not have heard of this person. I might not have heard of Brandon from Green Candle before. What is a big topic that he hit on his? What are some of the topics that he's hitting recently on them? You can really study what some of these podcasters and what are some of the videos that they're doing before you go on the show, just to kind of have a general sense. But like I said, be flexible with all of these things. Don't put yourself in a box. Get very nervous and say you need to, necessarily answer this question perfectly. Just know that they're looking for you to have some sort of opinion. They're looking for you to come out swinging. They want you to be like that guy that's throwing the darts, coming out to bulletproof and just being himself, right? I mean, that guy's absolutely electric. I couldn't tell you another guy who plays darts, but I know that guy because he, is out there just being himself and unapologetically himself, right? So I think that's a big thing that podcasters and media appearances and all these things, that's what they're looking for you to do, is they're looking for you to get out there and rant, not be afraid to sling it from the hip, and continue that aspect, or continue that throughout the entire conversation. So don't be afraid to give some opinions, because when you start worrying about, hey, is this the perfect time? I am not launching my product for another 6 months. We are still in beta. I'm not very sure when, all these things are going to come out. I'm not sure if it's going to be perfect, whatever. But yeah, and you ask yourself, hey, when should I really start marketing myself? My answer to you is yesterday, right? That's the best time to start marketing yourself, because people are looking for personal brands, right? If you think of Jack Mallers right now, right? If he has Strike, okay, if Jack Mallers leaves Strike for some reason and decides, hey, I'm going to wipe my hands of this, I'm never going to go into Strike again. Well, he starts something new. You're going to know what Jack Mallers is going to do, his next project. That's going to make headlines because it's Jack Mallers, right? So, like I said, you don't necessarily need to be Jack Mallers, but the quicker that you start marketing yourself, building your personal brand, the earlier or the more successful you're going to be, because the reality is a lot of startups, they have volatility, they have ups and downs. Maybe you have to pivot in one way, shape, or form. Maybe whatever you're building now doesn't end up working out, but you want to be building in the future. And you want to be an entrepreneur, right? As soon as you start marketing yourself and going through that path, people are going to know who you are, and they're going to be there to support you because of what you're building, whatever is driving you. And so I think it's never too early to start, and you should really always put yourself out there in order for people to connect to you, because like I said, it's not always the best product that wins. It's the one that's best marketed and sold. And so if you're a person out there, like Elon Musk, for example, he's a secondary guy. He's marketed SpaceX, Tesla, all these things. People have mixed reviews on Elon Musk. Like, some people love him, some people hate him, but everything that he does, people follow along because they've had some sort of connection with him. They've seen some interviews, whatever it is, right? And that has been able to really move the needle, right? So here's an example for me. Like, I streamed this 2 years ago. I got 9 views on this 36-minute podcast. I basically had zero clue on what I was doing at this time. And, to be honest, maybe I still don't. But the reason I bring this up is, without me starting to learn about the branding, what works, what doesn't, I wouldn't be at the point where I'm at today. I got started, 2-3 years ago. Some of the videos nobody would ever even watch. I would look at them with, a fine-tooth comb and try to determine how to make my messaging better, how to do better with interviews, and it's the same kind of deal with your product. You need to think about how you're marketing it, what the messaging is right now, and maybe that messaging can change down the road. But I think, like, trying to be consistent with your messaging when you're putting things out, trying to be out there and not worrying about being perfect is, a big superpower that you guys could have here going forward. Because if you're worried about, what the perception is going to be, whether you're marketing or doing something, getting on this podcast, being worried about that, your first interview is never going to be your best, right? My interviews that I did 2 years ago, 3 years ago, are not as good as the one that I'm doing now. And the interviews that I'm going to be doing 2 or 3 years from now are not going to be as good as, or are going to be better than the ones that I'm doing right now. Excuse me. Same thing with presentations and everything along those lines, right? Your first pitch, that you're pitching to a VC is never going to be the best pitch that you ever have in your entire life. You're just going to keep iterating and keep improving. And so that's where I say, start early and often when it comes to marketing your product. You do not have to be perfect. You can go out there, you can be bold, right? You guys don't be afraid to say, hey, this is what I think. And if people disagree with you, they'll let you know. But don't be afraid to, please everybody, because the more that you get out there, the more that people are going to disagree with you, the more that people are going to be, afraid. I think a lot of people in the Bitcoin space almost feel like they're kind of outcasts in a sense where, hey, I found Bitcoin, I found this niche community, but there's plenty of people in the Bitcoin space that disagree with some of the big names, that like some of the big names and don't like some of the big names. I'm sure there's plenty of people in the Bitcoin space that don't like me, and it's probably because I've gone out there and I've put my opinions out there. Some people disagree with me, some people agree with me. You can't be afraid to necessarily go out there and be bold. You need to take those chances. You need to try to see what works, see what doesn't, when it comes to marketing, right? You know, like I said, a lot of times when I was trying early on these interviews, I was, trying to take some swings, I missed, and I was worrying about every little detail of everything. In reality, 100 people maybe saw that. Maybe I heard I got one bad comment, and it worried me about taking some chances in the future. But the more that I got comfortable with, hey, you know what, I'm going to take this feedback, go with it, try to figure it out. The more chances I took, the more successful it's made me with the marketing aspects of branding and everything else, right? So the key to all of this is always be yourself. Do not be afraid to be yourself in anything. It's all takes some sort of confidence, and that takes the good with the bad, right? I mean, like I said before, people love to talk about themselves, so I'll keep talking about myself, right? So, former D1 athlete, but I also showed you guys the video that fell. I ate it, grown green candle to what it is today, but also, a couple years ago had videos that had 9 views or so, right? So, and those were, things I put a lot of time into. But what did I do? I learned from those mistakes and figured out that, hey, I can learn from others as well. So learn from some of my mistakes that I've made. Learn from some of the mistakes that Carr has made. Learn from some of the other mistakes that a lot of people that have been building companies have done, and learn from some of what they're continuing to do, and look at the signs of the big CEOs around the company or around the globe. Look at the signs from the presidential candidates. What do they do to market themselves here? Right? Why are people starting to build, personal brands and really gravitate towards that? What are these other big CEOs, big companies doing? Right? Learn from them. Don't just stay within the Bitcoin space. Really put yourself out there. Get started early and often. Jump on these podcasts. There's plenty of podcasts out there. Robin Sayer does one every single day. I'm sure he would love to have all of you guys on, my podcast. And then, there's My Bitcoin Story. There's plenty of the ones out there. There's more and more Bitcoin podcasts popping up every single day to help get your messaging out there. And you can get more comfortable with yourself behind the camera, talking into a microphone, and kind of continued from there. So don't be afraid to take some, be look at yourself and not be, you're going to be your own harshest critic. So don't be too hard on yourself, but be okay with getting out there and potentially making some mistakes, because down the line it's going to be easier, and learn from some of these others' mistakes and try not to, make the same ones that they made. And, with that, I guess not to toot my own horn enough, but you can always see some gradual growth. Maybe at some points you're not going to see it, right? Like in October, I saw like a big dramatic drop there. I think I had like 50,000 views. But if you keep at it and you keep, seeing some gradual improvements and things like that, you can see a skyrocket of growth, which can help you, get your messaging out there to a lot of people. So yeah, that is, I guess my last video here is not available. It was basically it was another bowler who basically was just saying, hey, I am who I am, so hate me and love me, and hate me or love me. You watched and that's all you could do, right? So he was very unapologetically himself, and that's what I think like you guys should really be. Maybe you're not as eccentric as these other people. Maybe you're a little bit more soft spoken. All these different things. I think that you guys should definitely get started marketing. I'd be more than happy to talk with you about some of the if you're nervous or anything like that about getting onto a podcast. I know, Car is a great resource as well. So, yeah, that's it for me. If you guys got any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them. If you've got any, things like that, marketing just in general and brands. But I think, the moral of all of this, be yourself. People want to connect with you, the brand, or with you in front of the brand, and go out there early and often.